Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're cracking open a seriously fascinating chapter in history, modern Indian art. We'll be unpacking a truly incredible transformation, how Indian art evolved from a quiet rebellion against colonial rule all the way into a raw, vibrant reflection of everyday life. If you've ever wondered how a nation's entire visual identity is forged in the fires of history, well, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get right into it.
So you might be wondering, how exactly did Indian artists break free from strict colonial rules to actually paint their own reality? We're going to explore the historical journey of how these artists essentially reclaimed their creative independence. And it wasn't just some overnight shift. It was a deliberate, passionate movement to take back the narrative of what Indian art should look and feel like.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with defying colonial rules, see how global modernism meets Indian identity, trace the shift to urban reality, check out new mediums on the margins, and finally, look at art made for the public.
All right, part one. Define colonial art rules.
So our story kicks off in the late 19th century. At the time, the British held this really strong bias. They basically believed Indians lacked the sensibility for true fine arts. So they set up art schools to strictly promote Victorian tastes and European market demands. But fast forward to 1919, and we hit a massive turning point. India's first nationalist art school, Kala Bhavana, was born in Shantiniketan. It was actually conceptualized by the legendary poet Rabindranath Tagore to forge a uniquely, unapologetically Indian path.
As you can imagine, this setup sparked a fierce clash of ideologies. On one hand, you had British academic art, rigid and catering entirely to European tastes. On the other hand, you had the pushback, nationalist art. Led by the Bengal School of Art and figures like Abanindranath Tagore, their whole mission was to create art that actually carried deep meaning for Indians, completely rejecting that colonial bias. It was a real game changer.
Which brings us to part two, global modernism meets Indian identity.
But here's the thing, Indian art wasn't just looking inward. Right after World War I, artists began blending their deep national identity with massive global trends. Just look at a Cubist city, painted in 1925 by Gaganendranath Tagore. He discovered Cubism through international magazines, but he completely made it his own. Instead of Picasso's geometric facets, Tagore built these mysterious, shadowy halls, using really striking vertical and diagonal lines. It's just a spectacular fusion of a global technique with a highly personal vision.
Meanwhile, you know his uncle, right? The famous poet Rabindranath Tagore? Well, he did something pretty wild. He turned to visual art entirely by accident, and quite late in life, too. While writing, he'd just doodle, turning crossed-out words into this unique calligraphic visual world. Using a super limited palette, literally just black, yellow ochre, reds, and browns, these mistakes evolved into captivating human faces and landscapes. It was a complete departure from the delicate style of the Bengal school, proving that Indian modernism had so many wildly experimental voices.
This whole era basically hammered home one radical new idea. Art need not copy the world, right? A canvas didn't have to be a perfect photograph anymore. It could be entirely abstract, pulling our focus to pure forms, lines, and color patches. Art was now about creating a completely new world right there on the canvas.
Okay, moving right along to part three, the shift to urban reality.
As we roll into the later 20th century, we see another huge pivot. The focus shifted dramatically from mythology and abstract forms directly into the gritty, chaotic realities of big city life. Artists like Arpita Singh, Nalini Milani, and Sudhir Patwar then deliberately shifted their gaze. They started painting intense urban problems from the perspective of the oppressed, really highlighting the conflict and social inequality thriving in the modern metropolis.
And the younger painters, especially over in Mumbai, took this obsession with the everyday and just ran with it. They actually started integrating popular images from calendars, advertisements, and film hoardings straight into their artwork. Some even slapped photographic images directly on the canvas. They used these experimental techniques to bridge the gap between quote-unquote high art and the everyday visual language of the streets.
That leads us to part four, new mediums and margins.
As the subjects of art changed to reflect modern society, the actual tools had to evolve too. Photography emerged as an incredibly powerful medium. Artists like Shiba Chachi, Ravi Agarwal, and Atul Bala used the camera lens to shine a light on people living on the extreme margins of society, like women ascetics and queer individuals. And they were also sounding early alarms on issues we are absolutely still battling today, like severe river pollution and crazy urban congestion. The canvas was no longer just for paint. It was a tool for urgent social documentation.
And finally, Part 5. Art for the public.
So how does all this modern energy actually escape the gallery and hit the streets? Through public art. After independence, public art became a completely crucial tool for nation building. And the most symbolic shift? They literally tore down those towering statues of British dignitaries and kings, replacing them with large-scale monuments dedicated to the everyday citizen, democratic values, and shared human labor.
We can see this transition perfectly if we contrast two epic works. On the left, we've got the Lives of Medieval Saints. It's a staggering mural spanning almost 23 meters of wall space. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the length of a tennis court. It was created by Binod Bihari Mukherjee right on the eve of independence. And on the right, Dibby Prasad Roy Chowdhury's iconic 1959 bronze sculpture, Triumph of Labor. Both are monumental, sure, but they celebrate two totally different pillars of Indian identity. Profound spiritual heritage on one hand, and the raw physical grit of nation building on the other.
Let's zoom in on that bronze for a second. Triumph of Labor. Installed at Marina Beach in Chennai, it brilliantly captures the intense musculature and extreme physical effort of four men moving an immovable rock. The artist clearly loved to dwell on the bones, the veins, the flesh of the workers. It creates this powerful curiosity that practically forces you to walk around it. By putting group labor up on a literal high pedestal, it cemented the working class as the absolute bedrock of the newly independent nation.
So, knowing how much these Indian artists completely transformed their world, from rejecting colonial constraints to elevating the everyday worker in bronze, it leaves us with a pretty powerful question. If you were tasked with designing a public monument today, right in the center of your city, how would you design it? What actually represents our collective values right now? Think about that, and keep exploring the incredible world of art around you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.